For those who can recall the early days of Smash Ultimate, the general consensus for who was the best character in the game is wildly different now than it was back then. While everyone more or less agrees that Steve is applicably the best character in the game, 5 years ago the one who took the #1 spot was, against all expectations due to him being a joke fighter in Melee, Pichu. Previously considered one of the worst characters in the game, Pichu took a complete 180 at the start of Ultimate, having received an impressive array of buffs to make him stand out from Pikachu. To see such a drastic change in a character once thought of as a joke addition to Smash was interesting to say the least. But upon taking a look at him in the present day, and when factoring a comparatively embarrassing 53rd out of 82 placement on the most recent tier list, Pichu has fallen off considerably in the eyes of many. Funny thing is, he's actually the last Pokemon I've yet to cover among all the Pokemon fighters, having given mention to everyone else, so let's make sure not to leave him out. For this episode of Why No One Plays, we'll be discussing Pichu. I feel like with this video, there will be two types of people. One group who came here just to instantly go in the comment section and type something like because he's the lightest character in the game and hurts himself, Kek W saved you 15 minutes and leave. And then the other group who came here to see if there was more than just prevailing wisdom affecting his popularity. My hope is the latter category represents the majority. In any case, for a bit of background information, Pichu in Melee was, for all intents and purposes, a gimmicky addition to the lineup, much like how people thought Jigglypuff was there to fill up the final slot by copying Kirby's moveset. The only difference is that Pichu was pragmatically just Pikachu, but with significantly downgraded stats and more disadvantageous options, only compensated, and I'm being generous when I say that, by having more powerful attacks. For many years, the Melee community at large came to an agreement that Pichu was the worst character in the game, and while that's no longer the case, it wouldn't be unreasonable to still believe that he is. So in an effort to make every character in Ultimate viable to an extent, they pushed Pichu to the extreme where he essentially had all the positives of Pikachu amplified to its breaking point, but likewise all the negatives of Pikachu as well. Initially, this resulted in him performing noticeably better than Pikachu and being in contention for the best character in the game alongside Olimar, likely causing both of them to get slammed with measurable nerfs very quickly. Patch 3.1.0 was effectively a death knell to Pikachu's baby brother, breaking him down all the way from top 30 to barely a mid-tier character. So let's quickly analyze what was so impactful about it. For one, Pichu's hurtbox was made larger, to the point where ironically he has a bigger hurtbox than Pikachu himself. Overall, he's still a small character, but a bigger hurtbox is always a negative for reasons I don't think need to be explained. Secondly, all of Pichu's electric-based attacks dealt more recoil damage, roughly about 30 to 50% more across the board. It was punishment enough for Pichu to take damage of any kind just for using regular attacks, but this made it so out of every 100% in damage Pichu took, if he even survived that long, a solid 30% would have been self-inflicted, which matters a lot when you're the lightest character in the game. Thankfully, a number of those moves did have the recoil damage reverted in 11.0. Last change was to his forward tilt, being notorious for having some of the best kill power in the game, especially in relation to how fast and safe it was. Frame 5 startup with a long active duration and -11 on shield. Now, while those nerfs are substantial, it's kind of hard to believe that a character would be sent over 50 pegs down the tier list from just that alone. Was it really solely the nerfs that made Pichu suffer the harshest decline out of any character, or were there more things at play that compounded said decline? One of the main things in my opinion that I don't think people give enough mention to is that perception plays a big role in character popularity. However, perception is often skewed or can outright be wrong at times. The dominant narrative right now for most people is, why would you play Pichu when Pikachu exists? While comparatively, Pikachu offers a more balanced moveset, again, you'd be hard-pressed to call them the same thing. It would be like comparing Lucina and Chrom with each other. Sure, they may have similar animations and moves and stuff, but their playstyles are widely different. The same also applies to Pichu and Pikachu. Pikachu is by and large a combination between rushdown and hit-and-run fighter. His short stature, fast burst movement options, and rapid strikes allow him to get in, get his damage, and get out, using T-Jolt and Quick Attack to create openings in his opponents. But while Pikachu relies more on evasion like Inkling and ZSS, Pichu relies more on blinding speed like Fox and Sheep, using his overwhelming frame data advantage and even faster physics than Pikachu to blitz you down in the hopes that he can kill you before you can kill him. The two might have moments where they play reminiscent of each other, but if you do a side-by-side comparison of a game featuring Pikachu and Pichu, you can't even remotely call them the same character. All that's to say, Pichu plays faster, much faster, with a more extreme risk and reward playstyle. While yes, in application Pichu gets overshadowed by Pikachu, calling them the same thing, again, is just wrong. But therein lies the first main reason with people not playing Pichu. Whether correct or not, he's still seen as a clone to Pikachu overall by the community, and admittedly, it's the Roy vs Chrom situation again where Roy happens to be more consistent and potentially more rewarding in certain scenarios. Second main problem with Pichu is, yes, his attributes. Pichu's far and away the lightest character in the entire game, being a full 6 points below Jigglypuff in weight, who is already 7 points below Game & Watch and Squirtle. Registering a weight of 62 units, he essentially dies 1.5 times earlier than Mario does, and almost half as early as Bowser. Loosely speaking, what would kill Bowser at 120% would kill Pichu at 60. This alone poses a massive disadvantage in the realm of survivability, but historically weight hasn't always been a debilitating cause for concern. Game & Watch is tied for the 3rd lightest character in the game, and yet that motherfucker's top 3 in Ultimate. Fox is in the top 10, and he's also super light, so why is Pichu cited for his poor endurance more than anyone else? A lot of that has to do with the way Ultimate's meta has developed over time. The reason for why Pichu was seen as number 1 at the start of the game was because Ultimate's faster paced gameplay in comparison to Smash 4 coupled with safer landing lag on aerials gave everyone the impression that aggression was king. Whoever struck first and kept striking would outperform those who couldn't. It was the same reason people thought Chrom was so broken despite nowadays being in the same position as Pichu. Chrom may have one of the worst recoveries of all time, but with him having the consistency of Lucina paired with the speed and aggression of Roy, good luck trying to land the first strike against him. Pichu's lightweight was a detriment even beforehand, but with prevailing sentiment at the time being that the best defense is a strong offense, people were able to overlook that shortcoming. Aggression has only become more refined over time. Doubtless every character by this point has developed some semblance of a 0 to 60 and fine-tuned all of their kill confirms, but in light of combo games and kill confirms being more optimized than ever before, it's resulted in the inverse happening, where now the best offense is a strong defense. Out of consideration for the increased likelihood of taking more damage and potentially forfeiting a stock due to reckless play, the meta shifted more from aggression to bait and punish, still retaining that heavy attack-focused approach, but instead geared towards responding to enemy aggression rather than exerting that aggression yourself. You can see this almost unanimously present among the top fighters of Ultimate. Steve and Sonic literally force you to make a decision against your will, typically a bad one, which they can then punish with a number of tools. Game & Watch's ability to perpetually keep you in disadvantage for so much as standing in front of him is why he's number 3. Snake punishes you for charging headfirst at him thanks to his grenades. Mythra can punish you from across the stage courtesy of her blinding speed, while Pyra can explode you at 60 at any moment. Every character, even across high tier, mid tier, and even low tier, has gradually adopted a more punish-oriented playstyle to account for, well, everyone else adopting a more punish-oriented playstyle. How this adversely affects Pichu more than most others is one simple reason. He's one of, if not the only character in Smash who can't adopt a punish-oriented playstyle, or in layman's terms, Pichu has to strike first because attempting to strike second will result in an uphill battle for him. An uphill battle he'll most certainly lose by nature of his stats. In order to punish your opponent for taking action, you have to put pressure on them to make them feel compelled to do so. And the best course of action for that is to throw attacks and tools in such a way that the likelihood of you getting punished is non-existent. For instance, Steve putting a 3-high wall then mining puts pressure on the opponent to stop him from collecting resources. Sure, you can say, okay, just let him do it and he has to approach you eventually, but giving him 20 minecarts and anvils plus diamond tools and golden redstone for powered minecarts is like giving Cloud perma-limit. Each of those moves are basically limit moves if you think about the kill power. That's also why zoners are so frustrating to fight for many players. They can pressure you to make reckless approaches that they can then punish, checkmating you without having to expose himself at all. To his credit, Pichu does have a projectile Thunder Jolt. In comparison to Pikachu's T-Jolt, Pichu's T-Jolt deals significantly more damage, especially in the air, travels faster, is bigger, and does more base knockback, making it good for tech chases or edge guarding off stage. However, this comes with the caveat of inflicting roughly 1% recoil damage on Pichu. So basically, if Sam were to pick a Pichu, you just have to stay where you are and watch him slowly kill himself. In all seriousness though, while Pichu has a projectile to force approaches, for the sole fact that the projectile in question deals self-inflicted damage, Pichu's expressly discouraged from using it in a zoning context. To his credit, Pichu can still do the same following behind T-Jolt method that Pikachu can, but in the end, that's still Pichu approaching and likely striking first, not waiting for his opponent to do the same. Likewise, with most of his support attacks like back air, forward tilt, forward air, and down air dealing recoil damage, Pichu can't even throw out safe attacks to control space without taking damage himself. Like I said, out of every 100%, it's not unreasonable for a good 30% of that to be self-inflicted. Taking damage from using our own attacks is objectively a horrible weakness and would be a negative even on characters with excessive weight like Bowser. For my money, the only thing stopping Snake from being top 3 if not top 2 is that he often takes a lot of damage from his own grenades. At least for him though, he has the durability to usually come out of mutual explosions on top. Pichu on the other hand does not. For most characters, kill percent for Pichu begins around 60%, so not only do you damage yourself, but it's on the character who can least afford to damage himself. This sense of urgency when playing Pichu combined with the continually increasing punish games of the player base across the board only exacerbates his worsening condition. Under normal circumstances, that wouldn't make him unviable, but competitively speaking, staking your career prospects on someone who can explode as early as 50% isn't the most sound decision to make. Once more, his frailty alone wouldn't be a problem if he had the right set of tools to mitigate it, but compared to other top tiers with similar egregious weaknesses, Pichu cannot diminish the chance of that flaw affecting his consistency. Game & Watch may be squishy, but his massive hitboxes and ways to escape a bad situation lower his susceptibility to getting hit. Rob is combo food, but he can box up close against combo characters while outranging anyone who would attempt to snuff him out with larger hitboxes. The Aegis have bad recoveries, but they exert so much pressure on stage that you have a snowball's chance in hell of actually throwing them off stage. Realistically, I think the only character who doesn't have an outright easy way to deal with this main flaw is Fox, but you'll notice how the tiny differences between him and Pichu are enough to cause a drastic difference in placement. His blaster, while it doesn't inflict hit stun, is still free pressure to make people approach. He has a reflector which can deal with projectiles when necessary, he has more consistent kill confirms than Pichu, and lest we forget, he doesn't hurt himself while attacking. Pichu's main weakness of being light isn't really offset by anything. He doesn't have large hitboxes like Game & Watch, his projectile game isn't abysmal but it's not great either, so he can't play campy, and finally he suffers from being stubby, causing him to get outranged by anyone who remotely has bigger hitboxes. So for him to beat them, he has to overextend, but in doing so he exposes himself. The annoying thing is that despite having a bigger hitbox than Pikachu, Pichu has smaller hitboxes overall. Take a look at forward air. Pichu's forward air has a body hitbox, but Pikachu's forward air has a slight disjoint. Pichu's F smash is basically a tiny knob in front of him, while Pikachu's F smash is basically a sword. You can see minor differences in hitbox size through moves like up air as well, so while Pichu is still small, it also means his attack range is small. Adding insult to injury, most of Pichu's strengths are compromised in some shape or form. It would be no exaggeration to say that Pichu's impossible to gimp. Agility in tandem with Skull Bash make it literally unfeasible for you to send Pichu far enough off stage to where he can't come back. Granted, he'll likely die before getting gimped, but humor me for a moment. Even though he can recover back to stage easily, Pichu has the worst ledge grab in the game, and I mean the worst. He's the easiest character to hit with anything that can 2-frame or even some moves that can't. He's even easier to hit than Donkey Kong at the ledge. Like if you look at his ledge hang, half his head and his ears are sticking above the ledge, so you can easily tag the poor thing with a long-lasting 2-framing move like Mario Dash Attack, Cloud, Joker, Sephiroth, Down Tilt, things of that nature. Look at him, even Pichu's cringing from how bad his ledge hang is. We already established how Pichu's high damage and kill power are offset by him hurting himself to do so, and I would say his final strength of being excessively fast blows back up in his face as it makes him considerably more prone to human error. Super fast characters have to be complemented by an equally fast reaction time, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, there will be a lapse in reflex. You guys remember how Cola has random moments where he SDs? Because he plays Vars so fast that sometimes by the time he registers he's not where he thinks he is, he's already dead. Or when Light dies to the most atrocious DI of all time. When playing a super fast character, tiny yet game-breaking mistakes like that will happen from time to time, and on a character with a hair trigger margin for error to begin with, this rubs more salt on top of an already salted wound. Overall, Pichu is a glass cannon to end all glass cannons, but he's a shining example of what happens when you go too far with something. It's interesting, last episode I talked about Pit being an example of what happens when you're too balanced, and now I'm talking about what happens when you go too extreme. That being said, I feel like a lot of people discarded Pichu and ignored all the things he can bring to the table in spite of his shortcomings. It doesn't justify why he fell off the face of the earth, but it does explain it. We're at a point in Smash Ultimate where the meta is progressing in the complete opposite direction of Pichu's playstyle. The biggest thing holding him back would definitely have to be that he has weaknesses that cannot be overcome no matter how good the player is. As mentioned before, most popular characters have downsides that through mindful play and good awareness can be mitigated if not completely neutralized, but Pichu's flaws literally cannot be made up for by getting good. What are you gonna do, play with only 4 moves? That's it for today though. I feel like Pichu's another one of those cast members where people underrate him, but I can understand why. Let me know your thoughts on Pichu in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my points. But apart from that, if you guys enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
崖外に出せばね、本当にヨヌピ選手一瞬でストック奪ってしまいますからね。そうなる前にまずは最終ストックに持っていきたいが、一つのシュ着地上に飛んだ。ニュートラル回避を刈り取るゲームメイク。さあ最終ストックどうする、空中したあえて受け身は取らない選択。コンボが高い横スマッシュ差し引きのニュートラルでしたが、それをヨネピ選手これは受け身取ってる。粘るビンヤ追い詰めるヨネピ。いったー、これは撃退湧き上がる